Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ianterviews, video podcasts where we hear from the people in the arts and entertainment fields that inspire us to create something of our own. My name is Ian McDonough, and I'm a voice actor and amateur artist working to be successful in the arts. But, most importantly, your host. You know, most people think when it comes to voiceover, we tend to only think of the talent in the booth behind the mic. But we really don't put a lot of thought into what it takes to record a performance, or what really goes on in a recording studio. Well, in this episode, my guest is going to tell us how studios record a talent's performance, and learn what goes on behind the scenes at a recording studio. Okay, so can you please tell us your name and what do you do?
I'm Michael McInnis, and I run a recording studio as an audio engineer, and I also create original music.
Nice. So, let's begin. So, what made you get into the recording business in the first place? I mean, was it a career that you always wanted to get into, or did you discover it later in life?
What I wanted to be is a full-time professional musician, and that's actually how I started on my path to being a studio engineer. I played in bands in the clubs starting at age 16, and that was pretty much my full-time job into my late 20s. One of the bands that I was playing with was back in the late 70s. We recorded an album at a local studio, and I kind of got interested in the technology at that point. And also, from the beginning through the middle of the 70s, I purchased synthesizers and got into electronic music. And so I started getting into music technology in the mid-70s. And after my band recorded that album, of course, it broke apart and we didn't play together anymore. So I joined a band that actually had access to a recording studio pretty much every night of the week in all the weekends. And we were kind of an original progressive rock band called Dirty Laundry. And pretty much I spent about 40 hours of every week recording our original music in the studio up in Blue Hill, which was co-owned by Noel Paul Stuckey from Peter, Paul and Mary, and one of the band members whose name is John Stewart. So after 2 years of basically being in the studio working 40 hours a week on our material, I kind of got the hang of how to do things technically. And soon after that, affordable recording equipment, multi-track on tape became available, and I purchased a 8-track recorder and started doing music recording for other songwriters and bands. And a few years after that, I joined 2 other people, and we started a studio which was called Megaphone, which later became The Studio on Casco Street. And so really I've been doing audio engineering work since the late 70s and full-time audio engineering work since about 1985.
Nice. What was the name of the album you produced?
The band was called Franklin Street Arterial, and the album was called Franklin Street Arterial. And we were kind of a jazz fusion band that did all original material on that record. And it was a small local vinyl release, and surprisingly, in recent years, that vinyl has gone for as much as $300 per copy on eBay, so that's pretty interesting.
Nice.
I'm glad I have a few copies in reserve. So, maybe in my retirement, I'll be able to purchase a few TV
Well,
dinners.
well, I'd like to listen to it sometime if I ever get the
Yeah,
chance.
yeah, that could happen.
So I guess your education was very hands-on. Was that your whole education, or did you go somewhere to like a special school to
I
further your
didn't go to
education?
school for audio engineering. I did go to school for a while for music, um, and study composition and arranging and that sort of thing. But never went to a music recording school. And to be honest, at that time, there weren't as many of those types of facilities as there are now. I mean, there's a number of places where you can go get a specific recording degree or media arts degree. But at that time, really, the system was you become an apprentice somewhere and, get the coffee and clean the studio. And then eventually, when an engineer doesn't show up, you get to do a session. And that's how a lot of people came up through the studio system in that era. Um, I kind of never had to be an apprentice. I just ended up as being a member of that band, having access to a studio. So that was the kind of really the technical education that I got. Though I would say I have to continue educating myself about new technologies and new gear as it becomes available. I was pretty fortunate in that aspect, in that I was able to learn all of this technology as it was first introduced, because it really was from the 70s until everything went digital
Yeah,
in the late 80s. And I was, learning each individual thing as it came and was invented. But today, somebody younger than me trying to get started with it, there's an awful lot to assimilate and learn. So,
it's so different now than when you started,
oh yeah.
basically.
Oh, when I was editing, we were cutting tape with razor blades and putting it back together with sticky tape,
Wow.
and some things were just ridiculous to work on that way. Um, we had 48 tape tracks for video soundtrack work, and if they made one edit in the video, at that point for the rest of the film, you'd have to relay all of those tracks back onto tape, and today it's just a matter of 2 mouse clicks and you
Oh,
you can
wow.
take care of it. So yeah, yeah,
We have
things
it
are a lot
easy.
faster and easier, I think, in a lot of ways. I think I do think maybe analog tape um, still has a slightly more musical sound. I won't say it's higher fidelity, but I think it's a more musical sound. But the maintenance and cost of tape and the cost of having an analog studio at a high level is just price prohibitive at this point, and really is reserved for people that are millionaires that have studios that don't have to support themselves through the work that comes through them, I think, for the most part.
Or or very big corporations,
Yeah, very big corporations, maybe. Yeah,
music
most of the
industry.
big studios I've been in are while they do big projects, I think most of them are really owned by people that are just enthusiastic about having the facility, and I'm not sure um, that it's a break-even business proposition. I think a lot of big studios are actually tax write-offs for the people that own them.
And so, for our audience's knowledge, where are you stationed?
My studio and my home are in Portland, Maine, USA, and yeah, the previous studio that I worked at, well, actually, it was a couple of different names. It was called Megaphone, and then it was later called Tundra Recording Studios. Those were both in Portland as well. Um, the studio that I learned in was up in Blue Hill, Maine, in a pretty rural location. But yeah, Portland, Maine.
So now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being stationed in a place like Portland?
Well, you have to be a generalist rather than be able to specialize in any one audio uh, realm, I think. I work on music projects, I work on advertising, I work on independent films. I have worked on video games, though not much recently. I've done animation projects, museum installations, a lot of studios in more urban areas are able to specialize in one thing, like surround mixing for film or voiceover for advertising, or but being in a smaller market, you kind of have to have a more generalized approach in order to have enough
Mm.
business to make it functional.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what is the medium that you work on the most?
Hmm. Depends on the year, but I would say right now I'm probably about 60% advertising work, radio commercials, mixing television spots, and web commercials. Probably about 30% music production for singer songwriters or other people that need mixes of their material that's either recorded here or recorded elsewhere. And then the rest of it is a lot of it is right now I'm doing a number of indie film projects. So I've got a documentary, an hour-long documentary on an artist that I'm working on right now, and then I've got a feature-length horror movie that I'm working on. So, but next year it could be
Oh,
something totally different mix. There were a number of years where I was doing a lot of public television uh, series production for educational television, math series for kids or history series for kids and that sort of thing.
so it's
And
like PBS?
yeah, PBS stuff though they were not produced by PBS, but they were syndicated programs that were aired on PBS
Ah,
stations around the country. Um, but
nice.
yeah, it's every year is a different mix of things, and you never know what might walk through the door at any moment. But yeah, right now I would say advertising is probably the biggest chunk, and then music after that.
In- Interesting. Now, which mediums, such as movies, television, commercials, animation, video games, music, to you, which is the most challenging, the most difficult?
Hmm. Uh, uh, I don't know if I think about it in those terms exactly. Every every sort of job has specific challenges to it, but I'm not sure that anyone is necessarily more challenging. In some ways, film projects can be challenging just because I often wear many hats on film projects. So sometimes I'm recording dialogue replacement or narration, plus doing sound effects design work, plus sometimes composing music, plus also maybe doing the final mix. So wearing all those hats, um, sometimes can be I mean, I enjoy all of it, but sometimes it's just a more intense uh, set
Hmm.
of, uh, of goals that you have to hit. Whereas, doing a 30-second TV commercial mix is a pretty quick and easy job, relatively, though there can be challenges in doing that sort of work as well.
Huh, cool. So during the recording sessions for voiceover,
Hmm.
do you tend not only to record, but also take the role as director?
It depends on whose job it is. Most of my clients like my input, and so they will get it during a session. So yeah, oftentimes, actually many times, there's nobody here except me and the talent, so I am in charge of providing some direction. But other times there will be people from advertising agencies sitting in the seats behind me, and they may be um, doing most of the directing, or sometimes it's direction by committee, which includes me as well. But it really depends on the session and the people that are involved in the session and what their preference is. Sometimes people want to be in total control of the direction, and other times they welcome a more collaborative atmosphere.
Cool. Yeah, I did hear that sometimes directors, if they're in another part of the country or in another part of the world, they direct through Skype, through social media, other
Yeah, there.
platforms like that.
Yeah, no, there are ways to remotely connect a client and for direction. I've done a number of things. Haven't used Skype a lot. I have used FaceTime on Apple devices before. Used ISDN, which is an old digital telephone standard, which is still sometimes used for long distance communication. And there are other software IP programs that allow two-way communication over the internet that some people use. One's called Source Connect, which is pretty popular. So yeah, it is definitely possible for I've had some dialogue replacement sessions with movie stars who happen to be in Maine, and someone in Hollywood needs them to come in to record a few lines. So done a few
Anyone?
sessions like that remotely.
Oh,
Any
sorry.
name dropping?
Yeah, anyone in particular,
Uh,
if you can.
Most of the time they want to keep that on the down low.
Okay, understandable.
Yeah, I think probably better not to name drop, but
Yeah,
some recognizable actors.
nice.
Yeah, but so that's been fun. High
Now,
pressure though.
yeah.
You don't want to mess up when Hollywood's on the other end of the
Oh
phone.
no, I bet not. Yeah, there's also a lot of for modern directors. I've experienced they used Discord. Have you ever heard of that service before? Discord.
I don't know if that service. No, I haven't used that.
It was originally designed for streaming and communicating with fellow gamers when you're playing a video game, but now
Okay.
they're using it for other things, just to chat,
Oh, that's interesting.
stuff like that.
I'll
So
have
they're
to check
using
it out.
yeah, they're using it for voiceover. A lot of modern independent studios are using that.
Hmm.
Now, have you done any voiceover work where you were the talent of the project?
A little bit, not a ton. Usually, it happens when there's a part that they haven't actually hired talent for, and they need an extra male voice um, that I seem appropriate for. I have done tags for some concerns. I think I was doing Allstate Insurance at one point many years ago. But yeah, I probably should have pursued that a little bit more than I have, seeing I have all the gear to do it. But mostly, I'm the recordist and not the talent.
Well, you do have a very nice voice.
Well, thank you.
So, do you hire the talent mostly, or does the company hire the talent?
For a lot of projects, I kind of work as a small talent agency. I have a number of people um, on file with recordings of their voices, and I know what their capabilities are. And a
Oh,
lot of times, a project will come in and they'll say we need, say, a female 30 to 45 that them sound bright and happy, and I'll send them a selection of voices that I think might be appropriate, but they end up usually making the choice rather than me. So yeah, I do deal in talent, but mostly as just sort of a coordinator and sending out demo reels for other people to make those decisions.
So your talent, is all of your talent local to Maine, or do you have it all throughout New England and Northeast, nationally? Do you have people all over the place?
Well, we were talking about long range communication, and
Oh, yes.
both both ISDN and Source Connect are pretty popular, and there are in the country what I would call voice farms, essentially, that have big rosters of talent that you can hire and then connect to using these devices. And it uh, it sounds like they're in the booth on the other side of my space, but they could be in Honolulu or Houston or New York City or Richmond, Virginia. You don't know. And a lot of times sessions with multiple people are in multiple studios across the country, and that all gets coordinated by the voice farm and just fed down one line to my studio, and I can record that in real time, and the thing's done. So if I need national talent, I will use one of those voice farms. One of them's called Procom, and another one is Studio Center. But mostly I try to use local talent if I can. I am a firm proponent of buy local, and so when I can and make my clients happy with local talent, then that's what I present.
Nice. Now, are you seeing more major companies turning towards recording in smaller cities in recent years? Or do they still prefer the major cities like New York and LA?
Uh, I don't really know. I don't really know the answer to that question. Uh, what I do notice as trends with corporations, I mean, local corporations have recording needs, and they will use local studios if they feel that they can get the quality locally. Um, I've done projects for WEX and IDEX and Unum and a number of other local companies. And they probably still source some of their stuff from national um, resources, but so I'm not sure that I know that there's a trend one way or the other, but I do know that as the web becomes more competitive for high quality ads for corporations, that it seems like they need more and more voiceover um, work in order to do all the social media advertising that modern day companies use.
Interesting. So, where do you see that kind of flexibility now with the web going further in, let's just say, 5 years? Do you think it'll change in 5 years where it doesn't matter where you are? Like, they won't always, even just major companies, maybe I can just hire someone that's not out of LA, but somewhere like
I,
far away.
I think a lot of companies already are doing that. In addition to these national studios that I was speaking about earlier, there's also websites that market voiceover talent, voices.com, and there's a number of other ones. I can't think of all the names of them right
Voices one,
now,
two,
but
three.
yeah, Voices 123, and there's probably another half dozen that are pretty popular. And a lot of companies will go there and pick somebody, and then so once they have chosen the talent, they will try, either the talent has a studio or they will hire a studio local to the talent that they've chosen. And so I do think companies that are using those resources are certainly um, a little more decentralized from the major media cities of Los Angeles and New York City. So,
Yeah, I guess where it mostly depends where LA is when it comes to animation, major animation studios, video game studios, movie studios. I think that's where they mostly focus on places like New York or LA, very union
oh yeah,
focused.
yeah, all the high end, movie stuff. Unless the star is vacationing in Vermont or Maine and they need something fast, for the most part, those people are going to be, recorded in the studio's own studios, or someplace that all they do is animation recording for Disney films or whatever it is. Um, but there's a lot of work that isn't, AAA list work, and so like I said, with web markets expanding the way they are, I do think there's room for studio growth outside of those major markets.
I see. Well, I think that's pretty much all the questions I have for you today. So before we leave, can you give any advice for anyone looking into getting into the field of voiceover or recording?
Um, I think for voiceover, I know I try to find people that have good acting skills, because a lot of times you have to play a character when you're doing voiceover. And so I find that people with some acting experience or training are usually um, better than, say, someone that's only done radio broadcast type work. That's not to say that's always the case, but um, a lot of times somebody will have a good voice and they can be a DJ, but that doesn't mean that they can actually play somebody's uncle in a hospital commercial, for instance, or something like that. So I think if you think you have a voice that could be used, um, get some acting training, and that would be a good place to start. Um, in terms of recording, I have I have kind of a jaded point of view in terms of um, 18-year-olds going into some of these recording programs that cost 40 grand to come out and then be an apprentice at some studio where it's really changed, and the person that's coming in as an intern or apprentice at a studio these days rarely get beyond getting the coffee order and emptying the trash cans, and to have 40 grand of debt in order to be in that position, I don't think is easy to recommend, but it works for some people. Some people go to school and they come out and they find a position. um,
So,
I kind of mostly, if people ask me what I think, I tell them, instead of going to one of these places, go buy a computer, an interface, a good microphone, and start recording stuff, and teach yourself, because
or learn online or
well, yeah, there's a lot on YouTube that's free,
YouTube,
and a
yeah.
lot of it's really good, and I mean, you can get a pretty reasonable recording setup for under $2,000, and then you don't have to pay $400 a month in college loans in order to get better at your craft. Um, so I feel awkward about saying, don't go out and get educated, but I think I think oftentimes young people don't actually understand the weight of debt, and the for most people, I think, coming out of one of those programs, they're not going to find a high paying job, and they're going to end up working in a restaurant trying to pay off that debt for the next 20 years. And I don't think that's really to anybody's benefit. So I would say go out and do, and learn by doing. Make a smaller investment, and invest your time instead of going into debt.
Now, what about trade schools? Are there any trade schools? Because I know those are cheaper.
Yeah, trade schools. I don't. Yeah, I think actually, I know they have. Um, some of them have definitely have video training. I'm not sure how many of them have audio training courses. I'm sure some of them do. Um, Actually, up at Husson College, there's a broadcast school up there, and they teach audio recording and video and all those arts. And I've seen student produced work that I think is really high quality. So they're definitely learning something. I'm not sure what the price tag is up there, but so yeah, I think there are probably affordable routes to getting some education, but I also believe that there are some outfits that are just trying to capitalize on the popularity of young people wanting to be involved in music and be involved in media, and are charging outrageous prices um, for schooling that's not really going to help them get a real job in that industry later on. So it's I just say buyer beware, I guess is really what I'm getting at. Um, and I guess that's about all I can say on that topic.
Well, that's very informative. So, again, thank you, Michael, for taking your time for participating in this interview. Hey, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Once again, that was Michael McInnis sharing his knowledge on recording studios and equipment. I hope you enjoyed hearing from him and listening to this podcast. I would really like to hear your thoughts and opinions in regards to this podcast. So please leave your comments down below and tell me what you liked about this episode and what you thought was the most interesting part of this subject. Also, please let me know what you think of this type of forum and what improvements you think I should make for future episodes. You may also contact me on Twitter and Facebook to let me know what your thoughts are. The links are down below. Thank you for tuning in.